Here's some detail for a good mental image. I live in a massive subdivision that surrounds a bunch of woods affectionately referred to as the trails. I suppose the people who own it left it untouched in case they wanted to add more streets. Anyway, I live down the street from one of the main entrances that most people use and know of. My friends and I were a resilient bunch who like to go out there and have fires, get drunk, and smoke a little. So considering we were out there so much, we decided we were going to build ourselves a little hideout, a fort of sorts, where we could party and even camp. We ended up with a good small clearing off of one of the winding paths. It was here that we set up a lean-to with some evergreen on top as our roof and named it Bear Cave. Now for the incident in question. This happened back when I was about 17 to 19 years old. I had just gotten off work and had gone to grab some fast food. My friends had called me earlier letting me know that we were going to meet at Bear Cave. So after I got home, I changed into some warmer clothes as this was during late fall to early winter, and it had been unusually cold that night. I decided I should get out there as soon as possible, and ended up taking my food with me to eat it there. Now it's about 8:30 and the moon was barely visible through the trees, but knowing the trail like the back of my hand, I wasn't worried, and assumed they would already have a fire going. As I approached, I walked to our hidden entrance and saw there was no fire, and heard no sounds. I took my phone and texted one of my friends asking where they are. They replied something along the lines of, "Sorry man, we're gonna be about 15 minutes. Great, I thought to myself. I ducked in and started trying to scrape together some wood and kindling to get something going. Unfortunately, everything was wet, and without a proper flashlight, I couldn't get into the brush and dig anything up. Soon after, I decided I might as well eat, and hurriedly scarfed down my 2 burgers. Before I knew it, I'd been sitting out there for about 20 minutes, and still no sign of anyone. I tried giving a couple of them a call, and after 5 minutes with no call back, I texted them. Still nothing. At this point, I was about fed up, and my phone was about to die. So I made a mental note. 10 more minutes and I'm gone. I squatted down, holding my knees to my chest, and tried getting warm. My back was to our little hut at the back of the site. I thought I heard something behind me. A slight crunch. I looked over my shoulder, and from behind the shelter I saw what looked like 2 beady eyes. They were glinting from the shallow moonlight entering through the trees. I quickly and quietly turned my full body to face it. I remember feeling as though I was about to throw up. Keeping my mind about myself, I slowly reached to my right where I had just laid down a stick, just in case something like this might happen, I guess. If this was a dog, it was big. Let me just clarify. This was not a wolf. I live in the South, and coyotes down here don't get this big. Something wasn't right. It just stared, unblinking, as if it was looking straight through me. It made no sound whatsoever. I realized whatever this was, it wanted to come at me. Thinking fast, I decided my best interest was to throw it off guard. I threw the stick, and without seeing if it even made contact, I turned, and I ran swiftly out the entrance, expertly placing my feet in all the safe places through the trail, assuring I wouldn't trip as I maintained max speed. I didn't stop until I saw streetlights and was safely back on the road. Finally, I see my friends pulling up, and all I told them was I saw something. They didn't seem too interested and still tried to go out there. I told them sternly no, and suggested we go to my house. This thankfully seemed suitable to them, so we went. I still don't know what I saw out there, and it was as though everyone forgot about it. I continued to go back out there, but only at daytime, and if I did ever go at night, it was always with a friend, and never alone. I'll never forget those unwavering eyes. the days, we take our 2 dogs outside to their kennels so they can get out of the house for a while and run and play and such. These are not small dogs. One is a black lab husky mix, and the other one is a full-blooded Staffordshire Terrier, pit bull. The kennels are placed at the edge of the yard near the woods. These woods are big, large enough to take a day to go hiking through them. Lately, when it gets dark, the dogs seem on edge. They will bark and whine toward the house to come in. At first, I figured they just wanted to get back into the house, but now I'm thinking they're actually scared. 3 nights ago, when I went to get them, it was already dark, but we have a security light so it isn't pitch black or anything. I got to the front of the first kennel and noticed both dogs were being quiet. They always bark at me excitedly when I go to get them, but they were dead silent. This weirded me out a little, but not to the point of being scared. I will admit that there was a certain uneasiness in the air, though, something I can't really explain. It sort of felt electric, like I was about to be shocked. The longer I was out there, the more uneasy I felt. I started getting the first dog, the lab, out, and I heard a heavy snap in the woods near the kennels. I froze. The dogs froze. By this time, I was so on edge that if someone had spoken, I would have jumped, screamed, and possibly ran. The creepy feeling in the air just kept getting thicker. The lab had her bushy tail stuffed underneath her, and she was whining. This didn't make me feel any better. The pit bull was as far away from the woods as she could get, whimpering for me to come get her. I can only take 1 dog in at a time because they get too excited and will sometimes try to fight, so I avoid that at all costs. I felt so bad leaving the pit bull there by herself, but I had to do it. As I walked away, she barked this high-pitched whining type of bark, and I've never heard that from her before. The lab couldn't get to the house fast enough. I went back for the other one and dreaded every step as her door is right at the base of the woods. I would have to turn my back to the woods to open her door and get her out. The air felt heavy and stale, with an unpleasant smell like a dead skunk as I approached the kennel. Another snap and I was about ready to run for it, but I didn't want to leave my dog, who had her head down defensively facing the woods. I could barely make it. To be honest, I felt like I was trying to walk through water. I was terrified by the time I reached the door. I heard heavy breathing behind me as I got my dog out. She was scared too, but started growling behind me. I was frozen in place. The breathing continued for a minute before I heard steps starting to come toward us. We both took off at the same time. A terrifying scream came out from the base of the woods. I didn't dare look back. I just ran. My pit bull pulled me all the way back to the house. I got in, flipped off all the lights, and stared out the window into the woods. I could see something moving slightly, but just barely out of the light. It moved back and forth for about 5 minutes, then disappeared. It took me forever to fall asleep that night because I was so scared that every little noise freaked me out. The next night, I went out to get the dogs earlier, right around dusk. I thought all was good until I was getting my pit bull out. A huge snapping sound like a tree branch had just been snapped in half rang out through the trees. It sounded pretty far away, so I just hurriedly got my dog and started toward the house. A few steps away from the kennel, I heard something big start charging toward me from inside the woods. We ran again, and it appeared to follow for so long, then retreated back. Now every night since then I hear sounds coming out of the woods like branches breaking and being thrown around, knocking on trees and roaring. I'm absolutely terrified. I no longer even take my dogs down there. I just take them for walks during the day and make sure we're all in before dusk. I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about buying a gun, but I'm not sure that will help. I guess I'll start with a bit of background. I'm a 33-year-old female, but this story takes place when I was a teenager, living in a suburb of Chicago. The village I lived in was quiet and middle class. We lived about a mile from the police station, and the worst crimes we had was a murder or two, and robbery once in a blue moon. 99% of the time. Pretty boring, and more boring. Unless you had a car, you were pretty much just stuck walking around the park with your friends. One night, my girlfriend and I decided to go hang out at a park with some guys at around midnight. That night was a bit windy and had a full moon. I even got a kiss that night from the boy I liked. But the night wasn't just fun and hanging out late. There's a deep forest in the park with a stream and a playground right next to it. The same playground we went to, with swings and jungle gym columns. There's 2 bridges, one of wood, the one everyone uses, and the one bridge made of rocks. It's rarely used because it's deeper in the forest. Both of these connect the 2 halves of the forest and park area. I'll get to the rock bridge in a minute. We hung around on the swings and chatted, just spending the evening together. I'm sitting and looking around talking and enjoying the peace and quiet in the moonlight. I have a full view of the forest and the dip of earth that I know leads to the stream. I see something moving over that dip of earth, some dark shape. It looked like it was crawling out of the forest. An arm, then another arm. It practically pulls itself out of the ditch, a figure darker than the surrounding woods. And I'm sitting there, stock still. I think I'm seeing things. It kind of just lays there, on the ground, but doesn't move. A flash of fear grips me. What if it comes this way? I look to my friends and no one even notices anything. I look back and it's gone. Did it go back or did it go somewhere? I really wanted to get out of there. Then one friend asks, "Did you guys ever hear about the urban legend of the rock bridge over the stream? Apparently some kids or something played on the bridge, fell over, and died." What a thing to say after what I saw. But I didn't ask anyone anything, and I just pretended I didn't see anything. But the experience stuck with me. I never talked about it because it must have been my imagination. Things like that happen only in scary movies, right? I rarely went to that park after that. And to the black thing I saw, if you are real, I hope we never meet again. Who knows what would have happened if you saw me the same time I saw you. So a bit of preface. My friend and I were home alone and had been for a few hours. Every time he came over, we went to the woods by my house, and it was normally uneventful, with some throwing rocks and breaking trees and stuff. Harmless fun. But that time, something else happened. Like I said, we were home alone and had been for a while. As usual, we went outside to go to the woods. But once we got there, something was off. Everything was dark. Tons of trees had been knocked down, and the entire place was not like I remembered it. Still, we kept going in, having our usual harmless fun. And at one point, my friend turned to me and said we should go back. I looked at my phone and saw that only 30 minutes had passed. So we might as well stay a little longer, since it would be a few hours until anyone would want us home. We continued on, finding a few strange things like an old crushed Mountain Dew can, probably 10 to 20 years old, and a toy boat which had been completely destroyed by the wind and water. It was probably even older than the can. Our plan was to go further than I had ever been into the woods, which wasn't very hard for us because I'd barely been that deep. After walking for a while, we came to a landmark, and I knew that it marked about the deepest I'd ever been. A while ago, when I was going far in, I came upon a bridge built on a log that fell over a river in the middle of the woods. However, one thing was different. There was something sitting on top of it. Whatever was on it was small and resembled the head of an animal. When we got closer and got a good view of it, it was a deer skull. pearly white and clean, just sitting on the bridge with no clue as to who put it there, or where the rest of it even was. Behind the river there was a huge hill with a creepy small house on it, and while we were looking around, I heard a creak or some other high-pitched noise from up towards it. Freaked out, we began to run, and from behind me I heard my friend scream. I heard him running behind me. We both kept running, and once we reached the edge of the woods, we stepped onto the road. I asked him why he screamed, and he said he heard footsteps next to him. We quickly made our way home, and when we got there, the garage door was open. Not knowing if it had been left open or not, we ran inside, locking the door, checking the house, and turning on the alarm. Now we're sitting here, and by the time I finish this, it's nearly 2 hours since, and I still can't shake the fear of those eerie woods from me. To begin, I live in a small town in Tennessee, and I live far back in the woods, on top of a mountain. I have some neighbors, but not walking distance away. Across my driveway is a road that leads to a TVA that is usually pretty busy this time of year, but with the whole coronavirus business, no one has really been around. Anyway, around 2 weeks or so ago, I noticed a car on that road pulled off to the side, abandoned. I didn't really think anything of it at first. I just thought it was a pretty weird spot for someone to leave their car. But other than that, I didn't really think twice about it. Today, however, was different. I was on my usual morning walk down my driveway, which is about a half a mile long, and normally I don't walk all the way down because I don't want to get too close to the road and run into any creeps. I should note that I'm a 20-year-old female. I'm 5'7", around 120 pounds, and have asthma. That day, I decided I would walk all the way to the mailbox and grab the mail, just for a little extra time outside since I had been cooped up inside for a week or so. I wish I hadn't. It was a pretty normal walk at first. I was jogging most of the way, and when I stopped to catch my breath and continue walking the rest of it, I noticed the car still sitting across from my driveway, and I also noticed something moving next to it. I stopped to try to see what it was, but I couldn't see very well since I was still pretty far away and could only look through the openings in the trees. So I continued down, and when I got to my mailbox, I noticed a man. He was just standing next to the car. I figured it was the owner of the car and didn't really think much into it until I noticed he wasn't doing anything, just staring right at me. I froze for a second, did a small wave with my fingers, and forced out a fake smile in hopes he would wave back and continue whatever he was doing, but he just stared. At this point, I was really freaked out, and as soon as I turned my back to him, I heard the sound of feet stepping on leaves behind me, so I started to run back up my driveway. As I was running, I could hear shuffling in the bushes behind me, and what sounded like footsteps just a few feet away. I didn't know what to do besides run. I had my phone on me, sure, but no one would be able to make it to me in time. I knew my dogs and my boyfriend were just up the driveway in my house, so if I could just outrun this guy, I would be safe. I continued to hear the footsteps until about halfway up my driveway, and then they just stopped. I stopped behind a tree to catch my breath and looked through the clearing in the trees to see the man turned around, tiptoeing back to the car. I'm still pretty freaked out by the whole thing, and since this just happened today, I have not seen the man again. I plan to do my usual walk still tomorrow, but will bring my boyfriend with me this time. Hopefully this was just a misunderstanding, although I don't think it was.